Do I have any clue what I'm doing? No. Hopefully it'll be fun though. We'll just see how this goes. This is my first book review. My husband is on a work trip and I did my makeup for fun, so here we are. Figured I may as well put it to use. So the book that I read was American Royals by Katharine McGee, and a friend from college gifted this book to me right before I moved, and so I read it and figured I would let her know what I thought. So here it goes. I'm going to structure this in two parts. Uh-oh, the lighting's changing. Let's see if I can fix it. That made it worse, didn't it? I obviously am not a YouTuber. Temporarily better. Gotta love a good partial fix until the sun moves once more, and then the lighting will change once more. Anyways, I figured I would structure this video in two parts. So the first part is going to be a pretty generic, no spoilers review for the book, and then the second part of this review would be just talking about like more specific things. So, starting with the world building. So, I think that the world building was actually one of the most fascinating parts of the book to me, being as it follows the United States, current day. Oh my goodness, this lighting. Do I give up? Potentially. Maybe. Temporary. Don't remember where I left off. But basically, the world building fascinated me because it is a hypothetical reality. No, that's not the way I'm looking to say it. It's a hypothetical version of our current reality had George Washington accepted being king of the United States instead of being president. So if the founding fathers had structured our political system differently, how would that have impacted our modern day society? And that was the most fascinating part of the whole book to me. The political structure change, the two most prevalent political parties were the Democratic Republicans and the Federalists, which were some of America's first two. I have so many pens, I need to stop. Okay, it's a problem. Does anybody else have a pen collecting problem, or is that just me? Yes, so that right off the bat, I think like the first chapter was one of the first things that stuck out to me was them mentioning the Democratic Republicans and the Federalists as being the two political parties, because that just kind of sets the tone for, okay, things did not go the same as they did in our actual reality. Another cool thing was that in the beginning of the book, like the very inside cover of my book is like a family tree. I don't know if that's clear. But basically, it traces the family line of the House of Washington, who is the ruling family in this book, the United States. Kind of just follows the line of George Washington from way back when to the current people that we're kind of dealing with. Those are the ones that we focus on most heavily. But I just think that it's neat that you can trace from George Washington to the current royals, or at least if it's not from George Washington, it's like far enough back to give some context. I also really liked the power structure that the author set up. And there was like earls and dukes, and talked about how the current monarchs don't knight people anymore because there's too many people with lands and titles, so they had to stop doing that, and so it's like honorary knightings and stuff now. And then there's like the old guard families, who were some of the founding families, I believe is what it was. But that's how the prevalent, powerful people in the nation have their power. It was inherited from either the founding father days, or it was land that was given to them once they were knighted later on for doing some good deed or what have you. But again, the political structure was the most fascinating part of the book for me, and I really was hoping that it would be explored a little bit more in the book, but instead it focused more on the romance, which is not bad. That just wasn't as intriguing for me as the political structure, which is a little bit goofy. Basic summary of the book, without spoilers, is it's like a hypothetical timeline where George Washington, he says, yes, I'll be king, and thus a monarchy in the United States is born. So this kind of follows way down George Washington's line of succession. So the youngest people in George Washington's line are either about to ascend to the throne or are of that age. They're in their 20s. Yep, their late teens and early 20s. So it just kind of follows that struggle. So looking at the United States, if it were in fact a monarchy, and how that would play out for some modern day royals in the United States. Overall, basic theme is a lot of romance and difficulty with figuring out who you are in that pivotal age group of late teens, early 20s, and balancing a lot of pressure from media and parents and the world expecting certain things from you. Basically, it's a regular like teen coming of age story, but with a lot of extra pressure because they're not the chosen one, but they are because royalty. It's enjoyable though. I probably did not make that sound super enjoyable. Anyways, this book actually follows it has 4 different point of views. So the first point of view would be for Beatrice, who is the crown princess of the United States. So she is set to inherit the throne. She will be the first female to directly receive the throne. Whereas in the past, in this world, if a woman was born into the royal family before the first male heir, the male heir would still receive the throne, even if he was younger than the female heir. So now, this is the first generation where the throne is going to go to Beatrice, the firstborn in the family, who happens to be a female, not a male. So she's got a lot of pressure for being the first in that regard. It also follows Princess Samantha, who is a twin, but not Beatrice's twin. She has a brother. And I can never remember his name. It is Jeff. Like Jefferson, I'm pretty sure. Because I have struggled with the names in this book endlessly. I mix them up and it's bad. Anyways, so Princess Samantha is the second point of view, and she, on the back of the book, it calls her the spare, where it calls Beatrice the heir. So you can kind of just infer from that, again, she's not the firstborn into the family, so she has a lot less pressure than Beatrice, and she's kind of trying to figure out who she is within the royal system without being the one that is receiving the throne or the crown. Yeah, that doesn't explain it well, but it's fine. The next one is Daphne, who is not of royal blood, but wants to be and is working tirelessly to ensure that she can. Lastly would be Nina, who is best friends with Princess Samantha, and so is involved in a lot of the royal world and gets to see things from a normal person's perspective, looking up at the royals, and she ends up intertwined in a lot of different parts of the story. And those are our 4 main narrators. So that's the general summary, is these 4 women navigating romantic relationships, friendships, familial relationships, as well as their place in the world and kind of discovering what that is and what their goals and aspirations in life are. That is pretty much all that I would say without giving too much away. Moving on. The main parts that I want to go over, I have a little notebook with a lot of notes, you know, as you do. First thing I want to cover is characters. I'm going to be honest, this was like the hardest part of the story for me, because for the most part, each character really pissed me off. The characters were flawed in a way that wasn't necessarily always relatable. You just looked at them as though they were stupid, because they were obviously being stupid. There's a difference to me between writing a realistic, flawed character that is relatable and you can understand the mistakes that they're making. Whereas these characters often are just blatantly wrong in a way that I don't think that most people would behave in the way that they do, ever. In their approach to solving problems, in conflict, all the things. I just don't think that the characters were super relatable. The unrelatability of the characters made it harder to root for a lot of them. They were just making stupid choices and being very selfish. And that makes it really difficult to want them to succeed. On top of that, if I'm looking at who the characters were at the beginning of the book versus who they were at the end, like, there was a tiny bit of growth, but anytime a bit of new conflict would be introduced, they would just kind of regress. It didn't feel as though they had learned anything drastic. It was more like the author would introduce new conflicts and drama, and then the characters who had previously learned something should have behaved differently when introduced to the conflict. But for the sake of drama, their development was kind of put off to the side so that they could react in a way that would progress the plot in the way that the author was hoping. So the characters were not very relatable, hard to root for, and one of my least favorite parts of the story as a whole, I think. I would probably give the characters, if I was going to give a rating, I would say 2 stars out of 5, with 5 being the best. I don't think I rated the world building. I would probably rate the world building as a 2, but not because what the author did was bad, but because I wanted more of it. Like, the bare bones were laid, but I wanted more. Maybe I would give it a 3. Okay, I would give world building a 3. Because the author did a great job with what they did introduce, I would say. It was very interesting and fascinating. I just wanted more of it. I wanted to understand more and have that be explored a little bit more than just what it was. Characters, I put in my notebook in all caps, annoying, because most of them were annoying. And they were also very predictable. I'll talk probably more about that later, but you could figure out the entire plot or character arc of the character pretty much within the first minute of meeting them or reading about their character. Maybe that is a good thing. It depends on how you look at it, I guess. You could say that that's true to form. The author knew what they wanted from their character and it was clear from the beginning, or it was just not as enjoyable storytelling. I guess it just depends on how you look at it. I'm someone that likes to discover and have some twists and turns thrown at me, and I'm pretty sure I predicted all but like 1 or 2 of the twists, and the things that I didn't predict were like minute. That says a lot. Plot. Okay. Again, like I just said, it was predictable. Not just the character arcs, but the plot. So over the course of reading the book, I wrote down in my notebook, like, I think I just said 12 predictions, and I'm pretty sure all of them came true. Or if it didn't come true, it came partially true, and we don't know the extent or what it's actually going to be until I read the second book. So I kind of dead on nailed almost the entire plot of the book. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing for a lot of people, but for me, I just like to be surprised a little bit more. I think that what is most detrimental to the plot is that there were so many convoluted cheating plots. And I'll leave it at that. I freaking hate cheating plots, and there were so many. So many in this book that didn't need to be there. They just were there for the purpose of causing more drama, and it wasn't necessary. It could have been done in other ways. Plot, I would probably give 2.5 out of 5 stars. The majority of it wasn't bad, but the really tanked the plot rating down for me because I just hate plots. And that's my own bias, I recognize that, but it really wasn't enjoyable for me in that regard. I liked the world building. I liked the premise, the overall premise of the book and the plot. The execution could have been better, and it could have put focus on other areas that I think would have more fleshed out the story and the characters rather than just made them unlikable. And since this book is not a very heavy world building book, it is a very character centric story, which is great and fine. I just wanted more from the character centric plots. Those I felt were lacking, particularly more in some of the characters than others. I felt that Samantha's plot was really lacking. Nina's was just meh. I don't feel like I learned too much from her or that she changed much from who she was in the beginning of the story. The one area in which she changed, but it didn't really have anything to do with her and had everything to do with a different person. So Nina's plot wasn't very interesting to me. Daphne's plot was interesting, but she just wasn't a likable character to begin with. And there were points of time where the author tried to make her slightly more relatable and realistic. In the end, she just decides to toss it out the window, and I think that's fine. That's a good character choice also. I was definitely more interested in reading about Daphne's plots than Samantha's. If I was to rate the plot lines of the 4 main characters, I would say that Daphne's is the most interesting simply because there's the most mystery involved in her plot. That was the one where I wasn't exactly sure if my predictions were going to be correct or not. There was a little bit more gray area. So I would say that Daphne's plot is the most interesting, followed by Beatrice, because you're wanting to see what kind of decisions she's going to make for herself. After that would be Nina, who's just kind of meh. You're interested to see what happens to her because she's a normal person interacting with royalty, which is what most of us are. And so in that regard, you want to relate to her. But I'd say that's the most intriguing part of her character, is how she, as a normal person, is interacting with the royalty, to keep that as vague as possible. Lastly, Samantha. I just found her to be mostly unlikable until one specific point in the story where the author, through another character, made me understand her character a little bit more, and that was helpful. But until that point, I just didn't care about her, really. Not that much. That's a lot of talking to say. The plot was just kind of meh. The characters needed more development, and I'll leave it at that. Romance. I wrote that the romance was so convoluted because it really, really is. It doesn't need to be. There's some sweet moments for sure, particularly between 2 characters, and then the rest of it just feels like an absolute mess. That's all I can say without a spoiler, so we will keep it at that. Romance, I'm gonna give it a 2. There were so many different romances happening at once, and not all of them were interesting to me or romances that I would root for, and often characters made decisions that I didn't agree with that made me not root for things that I may have originally rooted for, and it's just a mess. I know I'm being really harsh on these. I did overall enjoy the book. I'll get there though. The pacing went pretty well. It wasn't boring, it was predictable, but there was enough going on to keep you interested. And it wasn't like I didn't want to see what was coming next. It was just okay. Pacing, I would say a 4. I don't say that I would change anything necessarily about the pacing. I just would change the content. Personally. Trigger warnings in this book, from what I can remember, it's been a bit. That's all I'm going to say. It's been a bit since I have read the book in its entirety, but some of the main trigger warnings that I can remember were definitely bullying, a little bit of alcohol, and potentially drug use. I'm not 100% sure on that, but for sure alcohol, and I'm pretty sure underage drinking, from what I remember. Lots of cheating and manipulation. So much manipulation. That's, I think, the main trigger warnings that I can think of at the top of my head. You know what's good for you? Read responsibly. Basically, it is a young adult book. I would say it's not overly mature for the most part. There are, another trigger warning. There are potential sexual assault-ish stuff, and there is making out. It's not too graphic from what I remember, and there were no graphic scenes. The extent that you read is making out. So I think that's it. Moving on. Overall, I would say I would probably give this book a 3-star out of 5 stars on Goodreads. I haven't done a Goodreads rating yet, but I probably will. It was a very enjoyable read. I started it in the afternoon and then had finished it by afternoon the following day. And overall, I really enjoyed it. I'm curious to see what happens next in the world. It does end on a cliffhanger, so if you hate cliffhangers, just know that going into reading the book. You may want to have the second one on hand to just keep going. I probably wish I had the second one on hand just so that I could read it right away and have everything be fresh, but that's okay. I will get to it eventually. Yeah, I am curious to see what happens next in the story. I would recommend this book for people who enjoy royal romances or the idea of rags to riches story, those kind of basic royal trope type things that we like to read. Aside from it being relatively predictable, there weren't any major qualms that I had. I know it probably sounded really negative, but that's just me being very, very critical. Aside from me just wanting more from the characters, it was a good read. It was fun. It was a good time and some good escapism. So there's that. That is gonna be it for like the non-spoiler part of the review. And now I would like to switch over to my reading notes and just kind of go through a little bit more in-depth discussion of the book as a whole. The sun's going down quick, so I need to move fast. Maybe if I open the blinds, it'll brighten back up a little. We're gonna go with it. That is good enough for now. We'll just hope that the light will last till the end. I'm just gonna move on over to the more spoiler section of my review. Oh, I also am probably gonna post a separate video before I continue. I took little clips of myself as I was reading the book, kind of as like a reading journal so that I could look back and reflect. So I recorded myself as I was reading the book with my genuine responses and reactions as I was reading the book. And I put the clips together and it was way too long to be included in this video, so I will probably just post it in a separate video, maybe, just specifically for you, Kenzie, who gifted me this book, so that she can actually see how I was reacting as I was reading it, just for funsies. But again, it's a longer clip, so I'm probably just gonna separate it so that it's not super long on this one, and we'll go with that. Moving to spoilers. So thanks for joining me, if this is where we say goodbye. I am so awkward. One thing that I noted right away was that in chapter 1 they were talking about Beatrice's reputation and how when she was younger it was good that she didn't date and everyone applauded her for that, but then as she got older people started to look at her and say that she was kind of like, what did they say? Basically, they just looked at her more negative for the same thing, and I just thought it was hypocritical, but also it was interesting to see Beatrice's perspective on the situation, where she could see, look, I've been this way my whole life, and at one point it was a good thing and you guys liked it, and now it's frowned upon. And so there's just this double standard that she, the character, was recognizing, and I appreciated that. I'm going to skip over a lot of my predictions because I talk about them in my little clips. I think this whole plot basically is, why do these characters cheat on one another? That is this whole plot. Everything could be simplified if they didn't do that. I related mostly to Beatrice's character and her trying to gain confidence and figure out what was right and wanting to not let anybody down and having a lot of pressure that she puts on her own shoulders, but then also other people are putting on her. I didn't turn the light on. Pause. It's getting dark so fast! What do I even want to say? The cheating in this book absolutely drove me bonkers. And maybe I should have cut that out of the earlier part since I said no spoilers. Maybe. But it's too late for that now. The cheating plot was just to cause drama. It didn't actually drive the characters forward, and it just was annoying. There are just so many secrets and poor communication between the characters, and all of the drama could have just been solved if they would have dealt with their problems head on. And I know that's obvious, but... So my biggest qualms with the book overall were definitely the cheating plots that were unnecessary. The book was predictable, but that's okay. Is that better? I don't know. This book relied very heavily on tropes to push the plot forward. Because it was playing so heavily into those tropes, if you are aware of what the basic royalty tropes are, you can kind of just infer things. Like the bodyguard Connor that ended up being Beatrice's love interest. In my little video clips, recording myself reading it for the first time, I like legit predicted. They just mentioned that there was a bodyguard named Connor, and I picked up my phone and recorded myself, and I said, I don't know how old this guy is, if he's like an old bodyguard or what, but I would predict that this guy that they just barely mentioned in passing, we don't know any other information about him, she is going to try to like question her whole wanting to be queen if she can't be with that guy, because the bodyguard and royalty like relationship trope is just a common one, and I predicted it right then and there without knowing even that he was her age yet. So it's just something like that it can hinder your enjoyment. Is that the right word? Yes. As a reader, or if that doesn't bother you, then that's great. It was just stuff like that as a reader, I like to get fully immersed in the story, and since there were so many predictable factors that relied so heavily on the tropes, I was pulled out of the world that the author was creating because I was so focused on being like, yeah, this is exactly what's going to happen. I already know. So I wasn't in it experiencing the moment with the characters. Instead, I was me looking at it from my outside perspective. Delivery truck. Maybe it's an Amazon package for me, who knows? But yeah, so just like I was taken out of that moment as a reader because I already was predicting and figuring out what was coming next. And that is just, for me personally, not my best reading experience. Overall though, I would say that the book is okay. It's enjoyable. The most frustrating parts, the family drama that was unnecessary, the cheating and relationship drama that was unnecessary, the predictability, if that's something that bothers you. It's a good book, and I definitely would like to pick up the second one and see how it ends, because this one does end on a cliffhanger, and a lot of my predictions I haven't got to see if they come true yet, because they were about what's going to be the end result for Beatrice and Samantha, and we don't know yet. I will be continuing the series, hopefully, and again, thank you to Kenzie for giving me the book. I appreciate it, and I did enjoy it. I know it probably doesn't seem like I did, because I just keep talking about all the things that are wrong with it, but that is what I am thinking of at the moment. I did genuinely enjoy the book. It was super easy to read, easy to follow along with, and just a good time, except for the cheating. The cheating was not a good time. I enjoyed none of that. Again, I would probably rate American Royals as like a three-star book. I would probably read it again, particularly before I read the second book, just to make sure that I'm fresh on everything. Authors, please don't rely on cheating plots, because it ruins so much for so many. And that's all I have. Thank you for joining me for this adventure, as I have no clue what I'm doing, but hope to discuss books more with It really was a package for me when I heard the delivery truck. So long, delivery truck. I am clairvoyant, and that is how we are ending it. I honestly didn't know that was going to be for me. It's not actually from Amazon. I didn't have an Amazon purchase coming. So I don't know what this is, and that's going to be an adventure. I'm excited to find out. Yay. Christmas is obviously right around the corner, so it could be any number of things. Anyways, that's all I have. Thanks for putting up with me and joining me on this little chat. I hope that you stay safe and are taking care of yourself, and that you know that you are loved. That is all I have. I don't know what I'm doing, so thanks for watching.